Jesus, what a friend for sinners, Jesus, lover of my soul.
Welcome to the Unknown Bible, the broadcast ministry of Bible Believers Baptist Church in Corpus Christi, Texas. Join us now for today's Bible study with our pastor, Bevans Welder.
There is a fabulous verse of Scripture in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 25. Oftentimes when we're reading about putting on the new man, we read over the elements that come, or the characteristics that come with the new man, and move right on down to the end of the chapter. But we don't want to pass over a verse like Ephesians 4:25. Ephesians 4:25 says, "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. I call this message today, Tell the Truth. Tell the truth. It is amazing how dishonest people are today. There is dishonesty in marketing. Advertisers portray certain things in their advertising in order to get you to buy their products. I can remember going to the grocery store and seeing a bag of potato chips, for instance, and it was marked no cholesterol. Sometimes you find them and they're marked no fat. But those statements are intended to mislead you into thinking that because there's no fat or there's no cholesterol, what you're buying is good to eat. But the truth of the matter is, they have added something in the place of the product they have removed in order to keep a taste level up to your satisfaction. And that replacement product may be just as bad or maybe even worse than the product they took out. Another good example is the phrase enriched flour. Enriched flour makes you think that they have done something to the flour product to make it much better than it was when they first refined it. But the truth of the matter is, what has happened in the process, they have removed all of the nutrients, and then they have added back four things which, quote-unquote, enriches what is left. So the enriched flour is anything but enriched. What it is, it becomes a highly refined carbohydrate with a high glycemic index, which turns to sugar in your body. I didn't know that. I used to eat waffles and pancakes and biscuits and bread and sandwiches and all those other kinds of things. That stuff was turning into sugar in my body. A high glycemic index means that in my case, with low blood sugar, it was like poison to me. It wasn't poisoning me, but it was killing me because of what it was doing to my blood sugar levels. I didn't know that. Politicians are also dishonest. And you can tell their dishonesty, well, in a lot of ways, but just consider the names of some of the acts that we have on the books. And I can't obviously take this whole broadcast to go through all of the problems with those acts, but we have now something called the Affordable Care Act. Well, affordable is exactly what the act is not. Okay? It's anything but affordable. We have the Privacy Act. And as you've seen, privacy is the one thing that you don't have. We have the Fair Housing Act and the Community Reinvestment Act. And how many people lost their homes in the last bubble burst? How many communities are bankrupt or are nearly bankrupt as a result of some of these things? We have the Paperwork Reduction Act. I told my secretary when that one was passed, buy another filing cabinet. And sure enough, the paperwork just became overwhelming. These days, I believe you can take it to the bank that if they call it one thing, it is absolutely the opposite of what they call it. And they call it by the name that is the opposite of what it really is, in order to make it salient, in order for you to say, oh, this is a good thing. Well, it may be a good thing in some respects, but it's got bad ramifications, I can assure you. Now, you should have known, and I should have known, that the closer we get to the coming of the Lord, the more people are going to say one thing and it mean exactly the opposite. Take 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. All right, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3, the Bible says this: when they shall say peace and safety, then, in other words, at that time, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. Isn't that funny? They say, and the exact opposite is what happens. Here's another one. In Isaiah 5:20, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. You see, we're living in that day and age that the thing is exactly the opposite of what it really is. Here's another one. Psalm 55, verse 21. And this describes the tongue of the Antichrist, and what you're seeing today is that people are talking this way and preparing the world for a man that's going to speak like this to take over the world. Look what he says. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, but, or yet, were they drawn swords. You see how those things are? They're all dishonest, all meant to make you believe that they are one thing when they are exactly the opposite. You get so used to seeing dishonesty in others that you can hardly tell that you've become dishonest yourself. That's the problem. That's what we're talking about today. It doesn't do us much good to comment about all the dishonesty that's out there if we're having trouble with honesty ourselves. People ask, how are you? And you say, I'm fine, when in truth you're not fine at all, sometimes. A telemarketer calls and says, I'd like to speak with so-and-so is in the house, but you say, he's not here right now. Well, that's a lie. You say, well, it's okay to lie to telemarketers. Not really. Not really, because once you start telling lies there, what's going to stop you from telling lies in other circumstances where you don't want to tell the truth? You see, you get used to telling a lie. You also get used to, or your children get used to, watching you lie, and they say, well, if mom and dad do, it's okay. Someone asks your opinion about something and you lie. Why? Because you don't really want them to know what you think. Paul said, wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Let me give you some pointers today on telling the truth, okay? First of all, be truthful with the Lord. Be truthful with the Lord. I have found that Christians have a lot of trouble with this. It's uncanny how deceitful Christians can be with the Lord. For instance, if you are bitter, the probability is 99 out of 100 times, or 99 to 100, or however you want to calculate the probability or state the probability. The probability is that you are mad at God, but you will never admit it. You'll never admit it. And when you fail to admit it because you won't be honest with the Lord, you won't tell the truth to the Lord, what happens is you are not going to get over your bitterness. Let me give you another case. You are sinning, but you have found a way to justify your behavior by making out like God doesn't mind. You know what that is? That's dishonesty. That you're not being truthful with the Lord. The Lord said such and such that you're doing is a sin, and somehow you have convinced yourself by not being honest with the Lord, by not being truthful with the Lord, that what you're doing is an exception to what he categorizes as sin, particularly if he clearly states it. And that's how people in their minds keep getting into bad sin. I've got a friend of mine who does a lot of marriage counseling, and he says, you know, I don't talk about their behaviors and their psychology. I can't do any good with that. But what I do is I look for the sin. You know what? The reason they allow that stuff to go on is they have quit being truthful with the Lord. So be truthful with the Lord. Be truthful with yourself. Again, it's strange to me how deceitful people can be with themselves. They'll say things like this: well, I wasn't mad, when in fact you really were. You just don't want anybody to know that you were mad because they may find that your behavior was unacceptable. Say, I wasn't mad. Or you might say, I didn't want to harm so-and-so after you've been gossiping about them. I just wanted people praying for them. That's not truthful. If you wanted people praying for them, why didn't you just say, so-and-so has an unspoken request, and leave it with that? Why did you have to go into the detail? The reason you went into the detail is that you wanted to harm them, but you're not willing to admit that because you're not honest with yourself. Here's another one. I don't care what they think. As soon as you say to me or to somebody else, I don't care what they think, you know the truth is, you really do care. What you're saying is confessing something that's in your heart, but you're doing it in a way that I will find or somebody else will find acceptable. And the truth of the matter is, you do care what they think, and that's why you brought it up. It's kind of like talking to a child who's been lying, and you say, where were you today? And he says, well, I wasn't at the lake, and that's exactly where he was. And he knew that you were concerned about whether he was at the lake, and that's why he denied it. And by his denial, he has just made his confession. That's how you are. I wasn't mad. I don't care what they think. You do care. You know, listen, when you say these kinds of things, you know what the problem is? You are just like the politicians. And you say, I don't like the way they talk. That's true, but you talk like they do, because when it gets down to things that are very personal to you, you cover them just like they do. They don't want you to know where they really stand on an issue. What they want to do is gauge the wind and make the decision that is closest to the pole in hopes that next time the elections come around, they can get elected. Many times they mean just the opposite of what they're saying, and many times you mean just the opposite of what you're saying. And I'm going to tell you something. Being truthful with yourself is a big deal in things like AA. I'm not a proponent of AA. But AA has helped some family members, has helped some friends of mine. The reason I say I'm not a proponent is that I know that God can do more for you even than they can. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's true. Now, in AA, I asked a friend of mine one time, I said, well, how can you tell when a guy is getting ready to get in trouble again? He said, because he's not being honest with himself. He comes and he says things, and you can tell he's not being honest. All right, here's another case, and this is completely different change of topic, but it's very, very important. Here's a case where you're not honest with yourself in something that's very, very important. Listen, you know something someone is doing. I mean, something bad like sexual misconduct or like child abuse or something like that. And in your dishonesty with yourself, you have somehow justified not reporting him. Now, you need to be honest. You need to be truthful with yourself. You have to report it. You know, in that Sandusky case, there were people who knew about what was going on, but they didn't get it up the right channels, and that's why it became such a fallout for the university. I was talking to a friend the other day, and there's a pastor who's in jail now, and the problem is, what do they call that, statutory rape? He was with a young girl, and now he's spending time in prison, I guess 10 years or something like that. And this fellow knows the organization well, and he said, the strange thing about it is people knew there was something wrong, but nobody was willing to blow the whistle because they all wanted to stay in good relationship in their place in the administration. They all wanted to keep their jobs. Well, listen, you're not being honest with yourself. You're not being truthful with yourself when you can justify letting something like that go on. Okay? You need to get, as they say, you need to get honest with yourself. All right, here's another one. Be truthful not only with the Lord and with yourself, but be truthful with your spouse. There's so much what I call posturing in marriage. In other words, you find your place in the marriage so that you can basically sort of keep peace and all that. You find your place in the marriage, and you just allow things to keep going on in your life or in your spouse's life because you don't know what to do about it. Spouses are afraid to communicate. They carry stuff inside all the time. And these things that you refuse to talk about keep you in distress. And you know these things are a problem. Now here's the problem. Most spouses do not trust each other enough to be 100% truthful. So they lie about where they are. Where were you? Well, I was over here. You weren't over there. But you didn't want to tell your spouse where you really were, even though it might not have been a bad place. It's just a place that she would have disapproved or he would have disapproved of you being. They lie about why they are late. The fellow says, I'm going to be late again, and he tells his wife, well, it may again be something that's not illegal or even unbiblical. It's just that he's in a place that she doesn't want him to be, and he doesn't want to tell her, what the deal was. So you just make it a habit of lying about why you're late. Or you may say, well, the golf game went on a lot longer. We had delays. Well, in fact, what you did is you hung around in the pro shop for a while, shooting the breeze with your friends. That kind of stuff. It's just, I realize those things seem trivial, but once you open the door to dishonesty in the relationship that you have with your spouse, you see, then anything goes. You can lie about your intentions. You can lie about your opinions. You can lie about what's bothering you. You can lie to cover your faults. You can lie to make the other person feel better. You can lie about your love. Where is the end? There is no end. And I have seen that dishonesty in relationships like that just tanks them. And you get to a place where you can't talk about anything honestly. And all the trust is lost. So be truthful with your spouse. Say, well, if I said this to my spouse, that would really hurt my spouse's feelings. Listen, sometimes there are things that you really, really need to deal with in your life. And it goes back to being honest with yourself. I talked to a fellow one time, and he told something about his opinion. Actually, it concerned his love for his wife. He told her something, and it was unbelievable how hurtful what he said was to her. It was just terribly hurtful. And the problem is he wasn't honest with himself, and if he had been honest with himself, he wouldn't have had to say what he said to his spouse because it really didn't concern her. It concerned him. But when he said it, he hurt her terribly. And I'm not telling you in your honesty to hurt each other. If you're honest with the Lord and then honest with yourself and then honest with your spouse, many times you can get these things solved really well without saying something that you really believe about your spouse and causing that kind of hurt. People that deal with anger a lot of times take it out on their spouses, but the problem is they need to go up the line and deal with themselves and deal with the Lord, and then they wouldn't have to say the things they say that are so terribly hurtful. Okay? So I'm not talking about hurting each other. I'm talking about being honest. And if you're honest in your first two categories, many times you can be honest with your spouse and never hurt that person by your honest statements. All right, here's another thing. Be truthful with your children. It is amazing to me how parents talk with their children or talk to their children. I'll see parents trying to encourage their children by making them think that they're better than they really are. That's a dumb thing to do. I realize that children need to be encouraged, but listen, if they really aren't as good as you're trying to make them out, they're going to carry that with them, and then they're going to go into their employment situation, and you're going to be nursing a lot of sore feelings because now people are going to be dealing honestly with them in their evaluations, and they're not going to like it. And the problem is they didn't get used to that honest evaluation when they were with you. The other extreme is that parents will shame their children into thinking that they are horrible when they're not. Because the parents are dealing with some strange, what do they call them, issues. Listen, relationships are built on trust, and if you're lying to your kids, they're going to pick up on it immediately, and they're not going to trust you. You're going to have a hard time gaining their trust. Look, if you make a promise to your child and you don't keep that promise, you have lied to your child. If you warn your child that you're going to punish him for misbehaving and you don't punish him, you have lied to your child. Do you understand? And there are a lot of people that do that. Parents say, now sit down there right now. If you don't sit down right now, then you're not going to get any supper. Well, the child doesn't sit down right now. And there's a long ensuing argument with a lot of fussing and coaxing and all that, and the next thing you know, the child is still eating the supper and gets dessert on top of that. You're not being truthful. Okay? Just recognize that. All right, so be truthful with the Lord, be truthful with your spouse, be truthful with yourself, be truthful with your children. Here's another one, be truthful with your employer. Own your own mistakes. That's one of the hardest things to do. It's easier to shield it. It's easier to misrepresent it. It's easier to blame somebody else. But listen, if you have made a mistake with your employer, you need to own it. Don't lie about your hours. You know, people say, well, I'm supposed to be at work at 8 and leave at 5, take an hour for lunch, and they take an hour and 15 minutes for lunch, and they get there at 8:10, and they leave at 4:47. That's a lie. You have lied about the hours you spent at the job. You said you spent 8 hours there. You didn't. So don't lie about your hours. Don't lie about an illness. Calling in on a sick day because you have sick days built up, but you're planning on going to the beach or some other thing that you're going to do. Listen, don't get in the habit of lying to your employer. Don't lie about an illness. If you're not sick and you need a day off, you say, well, I don't want to take a vacation day. Dude, you may need that sick day one day. Don't lie about the use of the company vehicle. Man, there are companies now that have satellite global positioning devices on their trucks because they've been abused so much, or on their cars because they've been abused so much. Don't lie about the use of your company vehicle. Don't lie on the expense report. Don't pad that thing. Don't lie about talking with a competitor. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he has been approached by a competitor, and the competitor said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go back to your employer, and I want you to let them know that we are talking. You know what that is? That is high ethics. That is honesty. Don't lie about your employer to someone else and run your employer down when you're having some sort of an anger problem. Okay? It may not be the employer's fault, but you're making it out like it is. Don't lie about anything. And if you have to lie to get away with doing something, let me tell you something, then don't do it. So be truthful with your employer. Here's another one. Be truthful with your friends. You need to get in the habit of telling your friends the truth all the time. Don't lie to one friend when you're talking about another friend. Like running them down. Don't exaggerate the truth and make the story out bigger than it really was. Don't tell something on someone that is not 100% accurate. And I'll say this, it's best not to tell it at all. If you know something on somebody else, you know what you know to be 100% accurate, but there's no reason for you to tell the other person, don't tell them. What you ought to do is use this rule of thumb. What I am saying can be repeated with my name on it. And I'm not going to want to deny it later. And if I don't want to deny it later, then I shouldn't say it now. So be truthful with your friends. And then do this. Be truthful with everybody at all times. Never lie, and you will never have to remember who you told. That's what they always say about liars. Well, you got to remember who you told. Because you said one thing to this one person, you said something to another person, but you got to remember who it was that you said the one thing to and who it was you said the other thing to. And you're going to get caught in that. Never do anything that you would have to lie about. You know, when kids go off and do something irresponsible and they know that they're going to get questioned by their parents, and if you're going to have to lie about it to your parents, then that is a good rule of thumb. Just don't do it in the first place. Never embellish a story. There are people who lie by embellishing a story to make it up grander. You know, listen, if you're talking with people and they realize that you're trying to get a laugh and all that, yeah, that's one thing. But man, how often people make the story out bigger than it really is. Don't do that. If the person's in the hospital with a twisted ankle, don't tell people that there may be an amputation. Okay? Don't embellish the story. Never flatter anybody. Don't do it. That's a lie. To flatter somebody is a lie. Don't do it. Never pretend like the hypocritical Pharisees did. Okay? They pretended to be something that they weren't. That's a lie to everybody else. You want them to believe that you are as spiritual as you are. That's a lie. Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He is a liar and the father of it. And I'm telling you, you don't want to be in the devil's category. The new man is not to lie. That was the case of the old man. You need to change your ways. So be truthful with the Lord. Be truthful with yourself. Be truthful with your spouse. Be truthful with your children. Be truthful with your employer. Be truthful with your friends. And just as the best rule of thumb, be truthful with everybody at all times. Okay? That way you can be like the child of God you are instead of like the devil that you used to be before you got saved. Amen.
You have been listening to The Unknown Bible, the radio ministry of Bible Believers Baptist Church in Corpus Christi, Texas. For information about our church, go to our church website at www.my3bc.com. That's my3bc.com. If you would like to contact us by telephone, our number is 361-241-6100. Bible Believers Baptist Church is a Bible-believing church located at 1701 Rand Morgan Road. If you are not currently a member of a Bible-believing church and you are looking for a church with an uncompromising stand on the words of God, come visit with us this Sunday or Wednesday. We would love to see you.
Hallelujah.